where did this come from? How did we get to this position where you've got these institutions, and not just in the US, but you mentioned also the UK, the Five Eyes, including Australia, where these institutions have been captured by one side of the political spectrum, and they're actively working against their own citizens. They're part of an effort to discredit and sometimes even persecute political opponents.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's clearly all part of a single strategy to basically discredit populists, mostly on the right, but also on the left to some extent, but to discredit populism. And so it is, on the one hand, partisan because, of course, Trump was a Republican, so it manifested as an effort mostly on the left with Democrats. But it's really the foreign policy blob or the establishment. I mean, it was all the never Trumpers are sort of in that same group that saw populism as a threat. They thought Brexit and Trump were consequences of social media. You see them very clearly talking in their own in these messages and in other instances of needing to basically exert control over social media. They felt like they had lost control. And they say, look, after World War II until the rise of social media, the governments could basically control, television, radio. They had this kind of a monopoly control. Social media changed all that. They wanted to get control over social media. But even more than that, I mean, they were just waging psyops. I mean, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. It's true. It was psychological operations aimed at tricking people's brains. And I know I was a victim of some of it. The Hunter Biden laptop, I mean, sometimes it's very straightforward. You have something that's legitimate, but they literally did pre-bunking before the release of the Hunter Biden laptop. They put out misinformation suggesting that there would be Russian misinformation about Hunter Biden related to Burisma, so that when the actual story broke in the New York Post, people were inclined to disbelieve it, and that's how they were manipulating people's minds.
And there are people who still disbelieve it. Some of them are Democrat lawmakers. We've seen independent analysis by the Washington Post, CBS News, New York Times, and other outlets confirming the authenticity of the laptop's contents. But you still had a Democrat Congressman, Dan Goldman, try to regurgitate to you the baseless claims that the laptop contents could be manipulated by Rudy Giuliani or the Russians. Let's have a look.
Are you suggesting the New York Post could participate in a conspiracy to construct the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop?
No, sir. The problem is that hard drives can be manipulated by Rudy Giuliani or Russia.
Well, what's the evidence that happened?
Well, there is actual evidence of it, but the point is there's not
no evidence for it, so you're engaging in a conspiracy.
I'm glad you agree.
Is it frustrating having to explain things that have already been debunked? We already know that entire effort to discredit the laptop and its contents and the Biden family's dodgy business dealings. We all know that what that was now, and you're still facing these questions.
I mean, it's amazing because, of course, the Democrats the whole time were saying, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. And here we're presenting them with files, and it's Twitter files, Facebook files, CTIL, like actual documents, internal documents. And then he goes and presents this wild conspiracy theory for which there has never been any evidence. And there's only been evidence going the other way. I mean, you have to remember when the New York Post published that article, I think it was October 14th of 2020, they provided not only the computer store signature of Hunter Biden on the receipt left at the computer store repair shop that he left the laptop at, and the New York Post published the FBI subpoena for the laptop from him. So we knew right away there was like documentation. In fact, Twitter's own internal staff evaluated the New York Post article, and they said there's no evidence that this was a result of a Russian hack and leak operation. So to have a sitting member of Congress 3 years later, over 3 years later, continue to perpetuate a conspiracy theory without any evidence of that. I mean, he's claimed, oh, there is evidence. No, there wasn't. All he said is, oh, maybe something happened that we don't know about. That is literally the definition of conspiracy theorizing. I mean, it's really, you can't make it up. The Democrats, I think they went too far. I mean, they had just tried to ignore us the entire hearing and talk about Trump. And then Daniel Goldman couldn't help himself. He had to pick a fight with me. but obviously he had nothing. And I just think they get so wrapped up in their own ideology, they don't even know that they're like engaging in that kind of magical thinking anymore.